Registration of multi-layer laser-cut parts can be very important, but the easiest way to do this, using registration pins or dowels, leaves visible holes or even visible dowels. In this video, I'll show you 4 techniques for invisible registration features that you might find useful in your projects. The simplest way to hide registration features is to put them on something that doesn't end up in the final part you're making. Using a jig like this, you can precisely position parts to be glued together. The holes for registration pins are clearly visible, but only on the jig, not the part itself. A simple jig like this, which holds the entire part you're making, is fine, but sometimes isn't possible. Consider this set of 3 discs. No jig that encloses the full circumference of the discs can be used without trapping the 3 discs. I guess you could break the jig when you're done with the glue up, but why? Instead, you can make jigs like this one, which don't capture the parts. If your part is large enough, you can make multiple jigs to hold things together in many different locations. Jigs are also very useful if you have to make a lot of copies. An alternative to a jig is to use a pocket to build the jig directly into the parts. This larger disc has a very shallow circle engraved into it, just the right size for the smaller disc to fit into. The walls of the pocket prevent movement, acting like a jig during glue-up. Sometimes the parts you need to align are too inconvenient for jigs or pockets. One option for dealing with this is to use tiny bearing balls as inserts inside the space between the parts. You engrave very small pockets, just large enough for the bearing balls, in the adjoining surfaces. Then you glue the bearing balls into one surface, and let the glue dry so that the bearing balls don't move. Next, glue the 2 pieces together, using the bearing balls for registration. My personal favorite way to hide registration features is plain sight, by making them part of the design of the object. This little tag has a few different ways to register parts. On the outside, notches can be used, together with temporary inserts, to hold the layers in the correct position during glue-up. On the inside, this grid of dots that defines the text uses a hole diameter that perfectly fits the nails that I use as registration pins. You can insert pins into 2 or more holes during glue-up, then remove them later. Since the text is derived from the grid of holes, they blend in perfectly. But I didn't use either of those to register these layers. Instead, look at the very ends of these letters here. It's a little hard to see, but there are little constrictions that make the surrounding curves look suspiciously like the dots. In fact, the very tips of these lines function just like the registration holes, and that's how the glue-up was done. The dots around the text could be removed and still have registration features. The constrictions also add some visually interesting details to the text, breaking the perfect geometry while hinting at the relationship to the underlying dot grid. If this were larger, it would look even better. You can combine these techniques too. Here's a larger version of the text tag, except you can see that here I didn't cut the dots all the way through the bottom layer. Instead, I engraved little pockets for bearing balls. Because they're visible, they have to be visually interesting and incorporated into the design, and I think captive bearing balls look really neat. It would have been nicer if I had used thinner acrylic for the top, so the bearing balls were more visible. Well, that's it for this time. Hope you found it useful. If you make anything using these techniques, share a link in the replies. I'd love to see it.